In what is sadly becoming a reactionary motion of fandoms, petitions have been rising for works of film and television to be rewritten and reworked after debuting. There was a petition for Disney to redo Star Wars: The Last Jedi after the negative audience reactions, and Game of Thrones received a similar pushback in its final season. It seems strange that fans would make such laughable demands for a piece of media they disliked. But to be fair, there has been an instance when one show had an ending rewritten after the negative reaction of fans. I'm talking about The End of Evangelion, the film that literally rewrote the final 2 episodes of the anime series Neon Genesis Evangelion. The original anime series of Evangelion, created by Hideaki Anno, was a groundbreaking animated series of the 1990s. The show took place in the distant future where supernatural monsters dubbed angels are sent from the heavens to destroy Earth. Humanity is able to fight these creatures back thanks to giant robots called Evas. The Evas can only be piloted by teenagers and require intense mental focus to pilot, which is not easy for teenagers that are struggling with coming of age. The most unstable teen chosen for piloting is Shinji Ikari, a depressed and lonely teenager that is very reluctant to pilot a giant robot. He is also the son of Gendo Ikari, the leader of the NERV organization that manages the giant robots, creating extra contention. Other pilots include the mostly mute and mysterious Rei and the gung-ho Asuka, who shuts out her more troublesome past that comes back to bite her. As the show progressed, nearly all the characters became more damaged and distant as the apocalypse loomed, with bigger battles and heavier losses. It was a stark deconstruction of the genre where the giant robot battles only grew more somber as characters slipped further and further into their own depression. From Shinji's caregiver of Misato trying to deal with the murder of her old flame, to Asuka having her mind raped by an angel. These events don't find the characters bouncing back. They're forever scarred by these events that make them weaker throughout the series. It was also a deeply spiritual show, not merely for its visual themes of religious iconography layered throughout, but for its philosophies and contemplation of what the characters are fighting for, and coping with the loss of others and their innocence. There's a big shift in the second half of the show, both in story and animation. Anno became far more interested in psychology than anything else, and reworked the episodes to touch on topics not as explored in the mecha genre. As a result, the last 2 episodes became the most controversial of the series, and what may have been the most divisive anime finale in history. Episodes 25 and 26 brought the series to a close with a surreal psychoanalysis of the characters. There were no giant robot battles. Rather, the episodes presented a series of psychological and philosophical dialogues that had been brewing throughout the series, set to limited and experimental animation. And the show ends on a happy note of Shinji finally overcoming his mental blockage and being at peace with himself, surrounded by those he has come to know, like, and love. An excuse that many believe for this unconventional conclusion was that the show had been running out of money. Studio Gainax producer Toshio Okada stated that it was more than that, saying that Anno couldn't decide the ending until the time came. That's his style. Rewatching these last episodes in context with the rest of the show, it does seem in line with how Anno would want to take the series. After all, he was treading on new ground here, trying out themes and visuals rarely seen in the mecha genre. It was clear as the show went on that Anno was far more interested in the motivations of his characters than the grander spectacle of destruction and giant robot showcasing. Much like the characters, Anno disappeared into his own mind by the last act of the show, shirking the traditional format for a cerebral conclusion. Unfortunately, it wasn't what the fans wanted, and they reacted negatively, letting Studio Gainax know they deeply hated this finale, with anger and death threats, many of which were directed at Anno himself. And so, to appease the fans, Gainax caved and decided that they would literally redo the last episodes of the series in a movie event. And even though Anno defended his TV series ending, he would be directing the reworked episodes. The film is more or less what the fans wanted. Action. Lots and lots of action. Violence and tragic deaths of familiar characters in a grand showdown. Well, at least for the first episode. Which brings up an interesting choice in how this movie is structured. Anno seems to play around with the format of his film by making it blatantly obvious these are intended to be episodes being redone, and not a standalone movie in its own right. He places in title cards where commercial breaks would be placed, and even plays the end credits halfway through the film, which he then follows up with a 5-minute intermission. I found this strange at first that Anno would play the end credits halfway through the film, as it may have the audience believe the movie was over. Then he follows it up with an intermission for a film that isn't even 2 hours long. And then it becomes clear why. The second episode of the film goes straight back to what Anno was doing with his TV series finale, delving into the minds of the characters and peering deeper into their own thoughts and beliefs that terrify them, albeit this time with a bigger budget. There is a more definitive ending as to what happens outside Shinji's twisted subconscious, but for the most part, it's Anno's artsy take once more. From this perspective, the credits appearing midway through seems more like a warning that if you didn't like the experimental ending of the show, you may not like the ending of this movie either. The film also ends on a darker note, where Shinji is seen more twisted than conflicted, considering the controversial opening of him masturbating on Asuka's comatose body in a fit of frustration. The movie ends with the world bitterly destroyed, leaving only Shinji and Asuka. Echoing the disgust at the beginning of the film, Shinji begins to strangle Asuka, only stopping in shock when she weakly states that she's disgusted with him. Cut to black. No credits. The end. Despite Anno going back to more or less the same format in the second act, the action of the first act seemed to be just what audiences needed. A little burst of energy before Anno's deeper visual concepts could take root, because the reaction by many fans was the polar opposite of the TV show's ending. The End of Evangelion grossed 1.45 billion yen at the box office in 1997. It was awarded the Special Audience Choice Award from Animation Kobe, and it is even ranked by many as one of the greatest animated films of all time, from the likes of Time Out New York to Cut Film Magazine. The fans seemed to love it. But when taking a step back from the film's more bombastic nature, I found myself not as enthralled with Anno's second take at finishing up Evangelion. Many of my problems stem from his symbolism seeming sloppy. While certainly experimental, the film doesn't seem as thought-provoking or focused as Anno's original episodes. There is one shot, however, that does become very interesting for its inclusion. Remember when I said fans sent death threats because of the distaste for the series ending? Well, Anno directly includes one he received in the film, a brief flash on the screen of the email reading, "Anno, I'll kill you." I couldn't stop thinking about this shot. Was it meant to hold a mirror up towards the toxic fans, similar to a scene where we see an empty theater meant to reflect how pointless our lives are? Is it some sort of small protest against doing the film in the first place? Or just random imagery of reflecting life? The way that Anno bounces around so many theories and ideas, it can be hard to say. Ultimately, I think that Anno is in the same place making the End of Evangelion as he was with the series, searching for an ending he hasn't fully formulated. But he still took another whack at it, because most directors probably wouldn't turn down such a chance to take another dip into a world they had helped assemble. George Lucas once stated that films are never finished, only abandoned. Of course, a director would love to have all the time in the world to craft the greatest movie or TV series ever made. But the truth is, they usually don't have that power. They have deadlines to keep, budgets to stay relatively on point, and schedules of others to keep in mind. As a result, most of their visions may get lost or changed along the way. But Anno, given that his show was highly successful and fans demanded more in one way or another, couldn't leave it alone. Director's cuts were made for the final episodes of the series that added a few additional scenes. Later on, Evangelion would be reworked as a new movie saga, labeled not as remakes, but rebuilds. These films fluctuated with the structure, as the first film was merely a shot-for-shot remake of the first 5 episodes, while the sequels that followed were vastly different. When developing these Evangelion movies, he told New Type magazine in 2006 that this would be the Evangelion he wanted to make, not bound by limitations of the TV series. Sounds somewhat similar to another director who just couldn't leave his original story alone. You know, one who felt the technology wasn't quite there for what he wanted to make. One could certainly look at the success of The End of Evangelion and make a case for how forcing a creator to redo what they've already made can better benefit the fans. But there's no guarantee it'll be as big a success as this. On a critical level, I don't feel that The End of Evangelion is the better ending, considering how lost Anno becomes in his swirling ideas that he loses sight of the characters. I also liked how the TV series ends on a more positive note, considering it was about time Shinji finally overcame his mental blockage. However you want to look at The End of Evangelion, good or bad, the inclusion of the death threat email sent to Anno serves as, if nothing else, a reminder of how bitter and entitled the fanbase can feel. Maybe the death threats motivated the film to be made, and maybe they didn't, but those nasty words now stain a film that was an answer to the unhappy fans. Just remember that a handful of directors, if given the chance, will take to reworking their movies or TV series, and they'll do it again. And again, and again, and again. Thanks for watching this video. If you'd like to see a particular video essay in the future, consider donating to my Patreon, where I will be taking requests through there. Again, thank you for watching.